Hey gang, it's KR King of D&D Homebrew talking today about using the ideas and connections and whatnot that the players come up with as they interact in your world to modify or to expand upon ideas you already have, or even change some of the ideas you have. And what's important here is when I'm talking about using player ideas to modify or even change the storylines or personages or setup of your world, I'm not talking about the sort of collaborative storytelling narrative game you sometimes see with RPGs where it's a shared sort of, we're going to get together and we're going to talk out what our, not just our backgrounds or whatever as players, but we're going to have ideas about the way the world is constructed or whatever. It's not the kind of game I run. I run a world where we have this shared immersion such that I create the world, the NPCs, the monsters, the storylines, everything the players run into. Then they explore that world. And they ask me questions about it, and they investigate, and they develop alliances or enemies or, goals in terms of getting treasure or magic or the secrets of the world or, defeating the bad guys, all that kind of stuff. And we have this, what I call shared immersion. I know there's all these theories on immersion and whatnot. So mine is just that it's kind of a metagame concept, the social contract, as it were, about the game, where we're going to go into this game knowing it's an artificial construct, that I'm making this world up and the players are exploring it. We're going to act as though it were real. We're going to try to, when the players are role-playing, they're doing their thing, they're acting like they're in this world, and they're having whatever their background is, whatever their character is, they're going to act as real as they can. And I'm going to do the same with the NPCs and monsters that I create. And that artificial construct is that the world somehow exists outside of the mind of the GM and the players and must conform in that sense to certain rules we have about the real world. All the while, we know it's not the real world. So while I create the world and everything in it, my players in the process of exploration, where they decide to go, as I say, I run a sandbox campaign, but more importantly, how they interact with the NPCs is going to affect those storylines, is going to change things in a way I hadn't anticipated. And this is the collaboration that I'm talking about, a collaborative style. Without us just deciding what's going to happen, I have this set up, they make those decisions, and then things are altered to avoid kind of a railroady world. And then, of course, they come up with ideas about what is happening, what's going on, what are these relationships. They're formulating, they're speculating, they're discussing with each other, because there's always a tendency towards some mystery. People keep things close to the vest, just like in real life. They don't just tell you their whole story. Depends on how you treat them, what relationship you have. Is there something they want from you? Is there something they're hiding from you? And the players are always speculating, always wondering what these relationships are. And sometimes I'll have a better sense of that than you do as the GM, especially if you use my method that I've expounded this entire video series, which is create a skeletal kind of, the basic cities, personages, whatever. And then, as I said in an earlier video, I'll put the link up here. The players develop it as the players explore the world so that you don't have to do everything at once. But then in this context, you're taking their ideas, you're taking their speculations, and you're either filling in some details that you hadn't thought of, or you are, expanding upon something based on that idea of something you already had. Or the final thing is, if it's a better idea than what you had written down, you can change that. Now, again, that last one, that's sometimes a bridge too far, as we'll see. But so let's just keep on starting from the beginning thing. I'll just use an example. So I have Zodi, the Tavern Keep standard NPC that I have at the beginning of campaigns. I've created the background and the personality of Zodi independently of the players. They just meet him as this Tavern Keep. They all have a relationship based on their backgrounds, the starting point, his tavern. But I know who he is and his background, how we got to this tavern. But all this stuff's not set in stone. Once the players become involved with Zodi, they can have an effect upon him. So if the players do something with him that, one, I didn't expect, and two, would reasonably, Zodi would interact with this and make a change as to something he was thinking about or was going to do or whatever, I'll have that happen. And I have to adjust the storylines based on what's going on with Zodi. So, for instance, if the players discover this abandoned mine that's caved in, and they come back to Zodi and say, hey, we want to, excavate this. we'll go in with you for equipment or, miners or whatever. Again, that's going to change necessarily his behavior. Let's say he was working. I had this whole setup where he wanted to create this fleet of ships and the players weren't interested in that or whatever. And they come up with this new idea. Do I say, okay, he's going to invest in that? First of all, do I just suddenly say he's got enough gold to do both, or he's going to hire someone else? Or does he take that cash and go, okay, instead I'm going to go to this abandoned mine because that's what the players are doing. So I'm changing what Zodi is up to based on the players' activities. And that's the standard practice of collaborative, storytelling that my players expect in my world. They want the NPCs to react in a way that changes things. This isn't a narrative that's just unspooling that I've already set up, a linear narrative. It's not, that's railroading, right? It's not a module where we have to go to this point in this, we got to discover that. No, it's a sandbox campaign. They made that decision, and they're going to change Zodi's actions based on their interactions. And there is a deeper level to this collaborative process because as the players begin to explore your world, as they, discover ancient secrets or, long abandoned temples or whatever, or they just start interacting with NPCs and they begin to see that there are these levels of, cooperation, rivalry, relationships. They also begin to speculate. They also begin to wonder, why does this person dislike that? Or what's going on here? And they start to make connections and they start to think about things in a way that you as a GM can use. Because these might be connections between two groups that logically would have some interaction, but you just haven't had time to work it out yet. So the players say, well, I think that they probably dislike the fact that they're doing this. And you think to yourself, they probably do. Okay, so they dislike that. And one, that might be a more interesting storyline than something first of all, you hadn't thought of it, or if you had, you weren't quite sure. But the second thing is the players always get that satisfaction of figuring this out, of going, wait a minute, if they're doing this and I think there's something going on here. I think let's look closer at these relationships. What could have happened in the past? And you're thinking to yourself, yeah, I'm going to think about that too. So again, back to Zodi the Barkeep, I had said that he's a third level fighter. He fought these Orcan wars in the past in the Barren Hills. And he made a big score. He discovered a treasure, which enabled him to retire as a soldier and have this bar. And during the wars, he'd met this Valina, half-orc barbarian, and they got married. They run this bar together. And there's a whole secret behind this that I will get to, but this is what the players know in terms of Zodi. And so they go on all these different adventures, and they're getting up in level, and they go to the Barren Hills, and there's this village of Rodenburg that's at the edge of the Barren Hills, and there's this ex-soldier, Crassus, who runs this vineyard. And the players all speculated when they start talking to Crassus, he had fought in the Orcan Wars. That's where he discovered this land where he knew was perfect to grow wine. He makes this incredible wine that's very valuable and whatnot. Players had gone there to help him out. It's again, one of these long stories. But they surmised, hey, this guy must have known Zodi. And so what they did was they made some sort of veiled references to this to see what Crassus's reaction would be with stuff that only Zodi would have told them about the Orcan Wars. Does he know this? Now, when I drew up Crassus, I had some other objectives here. I did say he was an ex-soldier in the war. I hadn't thought about his relationship with Zodi, but it made sense to me that if he was in this war, he would have known Zodi. So it was clear that he knew him. The thing was, I didn't know what the relationship was, right? And I'm just doing this on the fly. So a lot of times what I like to do is let the dice make decisions so that I don't show a bias. Because even though the players had given me the idea, hey, would they know each other? It's reasonable. So I rolled. And I rolled that he disliked Zodi very much. They had a feud. So I made that clear with the players when he was talking about this. And my players are very savvy. They did not reveal their own relationship with Zodi, who's a good friend of theirs and is a good character. So that tells them something about Crassus, right? They're not going to like him. But I had just done this randomly. I wasn't even sure yet what the feud was about. So then in the course of playing, the players began to discover that Zodi had made some kind of discovery, some secret there, and they felt this from Valina at times and whatnot. This is, again, over the course of running. They also knew that Crassus, there was something going on there, and really what had happened is Crassus had made this discovery of this cave complex. They all knew there was this ancient civilization. He was thinking of using the players, but once it became clear the players were allied with Zodi, he had a beef with Zodi. He wasn't so sure about that. So I changed the storyline there based on that. So the players go and they're like, what's going on? Was Zodi, did he swindle Crassus out of this great discovery because they had served together? Was he jealous that that Zodi had made these riches, this treasure. They just didn't know. So then when the players did go back to Dramos and talk to Zodi and decide it was appropriate to talk about Crassus, by this time I had made up my mind about what was the source of the feud, which was Zodi and Crassus and a bunch of other guys had made this discovery of this treasure. Zodi was much more instrumental in getting it. Crassus had said, no, let's leave it alone. And he kind of came in at the last minute. Zodi took more of the treasure. Crassus kind of got the crumbs, enough to start this vineyard, but not the great treasure trove that Zodi had. And he was jealous. Felt like he'd been cheated. But the thing was, since Zodi didn't want anyone to know where he'd gotten his treasure, because this was a sacred Orcan site, and his wife is part of this Orcan family, so I connected those, that she's always wondering about this too. So he's tight-lipped about the treasure, so he wouldn't tell them why he and Crassus had fallen out. The treasure has its own history with the history of the world, the ancient civilization, the orcs, where the indigenous population of these humanoids came, which basically is the player characters, all this stuff going on. But the main thing was, he's tight-lipped about what happened with Crassus because he doesn't want anyone to know about the treasure. And here's the thing, Valina, his half-orc wife, she dislikes Crassus too, but not for the reasons, she doesn't know why they're having this feud. She associates it with this secret that's obviously going to be part of, if you've ever been married, part of their marriage, part of whatever. The players, again, key in on all this. What is going on here? And they created this whole thing by saying, do they know each other and whatnot? And they're speculating about this feud. Valina knew that something about this time with Crassus in the Orcan Wars, there's a betrayal, there's something there, something closely held secret that her husband Zodi has. And the secret was he had stolen this great treasure from under the orcs, this sacred treasure. And when they had this peace treaty, right, they wanted this treasure back, but no one knew where it was. It was a closely held secret, which was Zodi, Crassus, and some other guys. Some of the other people had died since then. I think Crassus and Zodi were the only ones left. As the players began to investigate all this, and they started to look into what about Valina's background? What's the story with Valina? Because as things developed, Crassus did not hire them to investigate this secret cave because they were associated with Zodi, and he'd already gotten burned once. But things started happening there where the son of Ragnar, Kurok, the Avenger, had started another whole series of Orcan raids and whatnot, which the players were combating. And he again was deciding we're not going to let these humanoids steal from us again. So they were making attacks on Rodenburg and attacks on and I got a whole video series on this. I'll put another link if you're interested. And so the players began to speculate that the issue with Valina and her family and with Ragnar and everything was that she was related to them. That she was in fact part of this royal family. And she had this signet ring that I had given her as kind of a flavor text and all this stuff. And they were asking me about this thing, and I could tell they're all speculating that she's part of this royal family. I had not had that idea at all. I had another whole thing with her as one of the generals who has been betrayed by Ragnar. He wasn't this great. He was kind of an evil traditional orc, and he had betrayed him, and that's why she went over to the other side and all this different stuff. Which, again, people don't just tell you this, right? This didn't just come up. And so this is the sort of the final level of this. When I heard the players having this idea that she's part of this royal family, that she is, if she finds out about this, something happened with Crassus and Zodi and Ragnar the Destroyer and all this stuff, I thought that's a better idea. So I changed it. I made her the sister of Kurok, the new guy, Kurok the Destroyer. And she had left them during this battle where this great battle of the something fields, I don't know, it's all in my lore. Instead of that general being betrayed, she had seen Ragnar do this and had gone over to the other side and helped them, the humanoids, defeat them, and was with Zodi, who rescued her in this battle and this whole backstory. But she was part of this royal family and she was this outcast. And if she found out that Zodi had stolen all this thing, the treasure of the orc's most sacred site, that would be a betrayal. Or would it? Would she align herself with her royal family, or would she stick with Zodi because he'd been a good person to her? And again, in this situation, because the players had created this, I rolled, and in fact, she would stay with Zodi. So then what I did was I created all this information based on her being part of this royal family, not just the daughter of some general who was far down the line. So I changed a lot of stuff in my world because I thought that was a really cool idea. So here's the thing. When you do something like this, when you're not just filling in details or giving the players the satisfaction of figuring something out that they really didn't do, you got to be careful. You don't want to do this too often, and you don't want to make it real obvious. In fact, change some critical element there. Change a little bit or whatever. Because if the players see that they can do this, that they can just come up with theories and you go, oh yeah, that's what it is. It's clear that you hadn't thought it through, or it's clear that you're just changing things based on their ideas, they're going to try to do that all the time. I guarantee you, because I've seen it happen. To the point where if I've done this and I can see that they think this is going to happen, I'm not having it happen again. I'm not letting them influence. I'm trying to set things up in advance. I'm trying to make decisions about things so that it's not them. Because you don't, if you're running a sandbox like I am, you're running a world they're supposed to explore, you're going to lose that social contract that I'm setting up the world and they're exploring it. And then their activities are going to change the way these people are set up, but they're not going to metagame and create the world because they'll start to do that. And they'll start to think, is KR here making changes to things, not only letting us do what we want to do, but being like, oh, no, that's no good. You figured that. I'm going to change it this way or something like that. You don't want to have that. But the thing is, the players, they're looking at your world from different eyes. They're looking at what you set up, and they may make these connections or may have these ideas that are really good, that are better than what you thought of. That's the beauty of setting up the skeletal, just basic ideas of your world and then filling it in as the players explore it, and also filling it in based on their ideas. But it's also the cool part of accepting the fact that the players may think of things that you hadn't thought of, may think of really cool ideas and storylines that you couldn't even imagine. And then your thing as a GM is to try to incorporate those in such a way that it's not so obvious to the players. So hopefully that's helpful to you. If you like what you've seen, please subscribe to my channel. I'd love to hear your stories about, and I've heard these before in some comments about how player ideas GMs incorporate into their world. Most importantly, keep playing an RPG game, whichever one you choose. Tell somebody else about it.